All right. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. So, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here at Women's Arb Camp, and thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
And we hope you've all had a great time and good experience here. It's great to see such an event happening. I think it's very important in the industry. And then also a little introduction about myself and Andreas before we start. So me, I'm Fian Hunter, and I'm a UK arborist. So I started my career in the UK. I've done a 2-year education. It's called a National Diploma in Forestry and Arboriculture. And then I started working for a commercial arborist company in the UK called Conic Tree Care. And I worked for 5 years in the UK as a climbing arborist. And then I moved to Sweden. And I've been living and working here in the south of Sweden for 7 years, coming up to 8 years in August. And yeah, so I've been in the industry for just around about 12 years as a climbing arborist. Yeah, and this is Andreas.
Yeah, hello. My name is Andreas Wellfelt. I'm from Sweden, and I was educated at Vilan. It's also a 2-year education, and I managed to work for almost a year before I had an accident at work and got injured and can no longer climb. So I think we'll be trying to talk a little bit about how the site was and what we were doing, the actual accident, aftermath of that, and aftermath of the aftermath, so to speak, like how we have both come back from a major event in our life. Because I mean, for me, it's kind of important to highlight that if one person gets injured at work, there's always going to be another that is also taking part of this event, and it affects both or more people that are there, it's going to be at the site, and the other person often gets forgotten in a sense,
Or it gets overlooked.
because physical trauma is so much more obvious than psychological trauma. So it's I think it's good that we are both here to talk about the same thing but from different points of view. Right?
Yeah. Right. Okay. So now we'll get into what happened and the whole scenario and the chain of events that took part. And I'm going to say it from my perspective, and then Andreas will add to that and say it from his perspective, so you get both parts of the story. Okay, so we was working together on a 2-man crew, and we was working down in a part of the south of Sweden called Höllviken, and we had a job site which involved, there was 2 trees to work on that day, or on that specific job. So the first job, which was the bigger tree of the job, so we wanted to start there to get the bulk part of the job done, was an oak tree, which wasn't the biggest oak tree, but it was more spready than it was high. So it didn't really give us the best anchor points, but that's kind of not really relevant. Anyway, there was 1 oak tree to do a crown reduction on, and then there was also 1 pine tree to do a height reduction on. And yeah, we both got to the work site maybe around 8 in the morning, and we started the work. We spoke with the client and started the job. So we started on the oak tree. We done the crown reduction, or at least all of the climbing work that needed to be done, which involved both of us being in the tree at the same time. And yeah, we got all of the climbing done there, and then we was going to have a breakfast break. And then we was just talking in the car when we was having a bit of breakfast about how we was going to attack the job after breakfast, what we're going to do and who's going to do what. And Andreas was always very keen to know what's going to happen next. So, I want to, what's going on next and all of this, which is great. So yeah, we was talking through, so we was like, okay, having a bit of food, and then I was like, okay, so we've done all the climbing in the oak, so someone needs to do the fine tuning per se with the pole pruners, the stuff that we couldn't reach or was easier to get from the ground. So one person needed to do that, and then one person was going to be doing the height reduction on the pine tree, bearing in mind that both these trees were in the back garden of the client's property, and they weren't that far away from each other. So
no, there's like a visible
yeah, a visible light of
them,
sign between both trees that we were working on that site. And so yeah, we was talking through that, and then Andreas was like, okay, so what can I do next after we've had some breakfast? So I was like, okay, well, do you want to jump up the pine tree? And he was like, okay, yep, that's fine. I was like, okay, I can work on the ground and finish off the oak, and I'll keep a bit of an eye on you if you need any help or guidance. And then yeah, so we finished our breakfast break, and then we continued. So Andreas started ascending into this pine tree, and I started working on or finishing off the oak tree from the ground with the pole pruners and whatnot. And then so Andreas was making his way to the top of this pine tree, bearing in mind the pine tree wasn't that big. It was only, let's say, roughly 8 meters high.
Yeah,
or maybe 9 meters, maybe 10 meters max. Or
no. It's not a big tree. We're talking about a self-seeded pine tree.
Yeah.
Maybe
8.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Maximum 7-8 meters.
Yeah.
Nothing more like that. It was not a big tree.
Like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Half the size of that.
Yeah, not that big even. I mean, it was
Yeah, it wasn't anything massive by any means.
I would say like maybe DBH of maybe like this. So
At the base.
it's not a huge tree.
Yeah.
Apparently too big for the client to have in his garden. So.
Yeah. So Andreas was getting to the top of the tree, and I was continuing doing some work on the ground on the oak, and then Andreas got to the highest point in the tree where he set his main anchor point, and then once he installed his system and was happy, he shouted over to me, can you give me some guidance on where to bring the new height of the pine tree? I said, okay, yep. So we had a little chat, and we agreed like, this is a good new height. And then Andreas continued to reduce the tree to that height, and then I continued on the ground with the oak tree, bearing in mind I could see Andreas kind of roughly in my peripheral vision while working on the oak. I wasn't paying too much attention. I was focused on my own work, within reason. And then yep, so let's say he's got his main anchor point, I'm still working on the ground. We've established the new height of the pine tree regarding the client's needs, and then yeah, we continued working for maybe another 5-10 minutes, and then out of nowhere I hear this. When you're on a work site, there's a scream that you hear that isn't so piercing to the ears, like maybe someone just bumped their leg and it's like, that hurt. And then there's another type of scream that tells you I'm in a serious accident or something very bad has happened. And it was that scream that I heard. And in that moment, I turned around, let's just say the pine tree's over here, and I saw Andreas falling from the pine tree, and he landed. There was no branches in the way, it was a clear drop, so nothing to break his fall per se, and he hit the ground, and I actually heard his back break. I heard that sound, and that will live with me for the rest of my life. And obviously in that moment, and this is a little side note regarding the story. If anyone, I guess pretty much all of you have done CPR training or first aid, and normally they talk about there's 3 types of people in a serious accident or a serious injury or scenario. So there's one person, and this isn't anything, I'm not trying to pick or put fingers on any person. This is just how people act in a scary or very high pressure situation. So there's one person who freezes out of the stress or what's happening. There's one person who acts, and he'll just try and do whatever he needs to do to try and resolve the situation to a degree. And then there's one person who will run because the situation at hand would be too overwhelming and they need to back away. So this is nothing, it doesn't matter which category you fall into, that's just how humans operate, from my perspective at least. And luckily in this situation I acted. So obviously the accident's happened and I've run over to Andreas to make sure that he's all right. He landed on the ground. The top that he was anchored into is kind of on top of him with his main primary line around the branch. And so I detached his main system from the branch and got that off him, and he was still awake, he was still conscious with me. So at that point I was just trying to reassure him and say, don't move, mate, just stay where you are. And I kept him warm, and my main goal in that situation at that point in time was to keep him awake. I don't know if he's got any internal bleeding, any internal injuries that could cause him to pass out, and then we'd have to go into CPR. Luckily that wasn't the case, and he was awake and conscious, just in a lot of pain and stressful environment under the circumstances. So in that moment the clients come out, what the hell's going on? Call 112, which was, for me, as I'm not a native speaker, in that high stressful situation, was the best thing for me to do, because it was the client's address. He's going to be able to give them the correct details as quickly as possible, and in my eyes that was the best way to handle the situation. And basically, I was just staying with Andreas and keeping him reassured, talking to him, and doing as best as I can in that situation. And then the emergency services came within roughly 15 minutes, I would say. And then obviously they took over from that point and done what was necessary to get Andreas to the hospital and all of that.
Yeah.
And then also obviously the police came, and then my boss, Andreas Eriksson, he came. And then at that point it was very overwhelming emotionally for me, because I was the foreman on site, the person in charge, even though in the bigger picture of things I can say now it wasn't my fault. However, at the time, me being the most responsible and most experienced person on the site, it felt like that I was responsible to a degree. And if any of you are foremen or team leaders, I'm sure you can relate that you feel responsible if someone gets injured, because the main priority on a work site is that everyone gets home safe. And that, that's from my opinion anyway. So the emergency services have arrived and they're taking care of Andreas, and then my boss arrives, he comes over to me, and I just can't hold my emotions back. I burst into tears and I need some support at that moment. And then, little side note, the client had some very nice whiskey, so I had some of that whiskey, that's for sure. So that's my take on the day's events.
Yeah.
I'll pass you over to Andreas now.
Yeah, so mine is a little bit different actually, because I clearly have gaps in what's happened. From my point of view, when I am in this pine, reduction cut's been done. I know apical dominance has been broken, and I don't want this pine tree to have 5 new tops. I'm dealing with that, just pruning buds, and at some point from there is a little there, I see green and a little bit of yellow. That is my helmet, and then I hit the ground and half my body just disappears, like in an instant. Like I know what's happened. I understand that I've broken my back, shout this to Fian, and then like there is nothing I can do. There's just like a calmness coming over, shock clearly. And for me, that whole event is I mean, I know what's happened, but I also couldn't really foresee it happening. The tree had no defects. It was a similar tree that I have, like size-wise, climbed in before. My main worry was actually not breaking branches on my way up and being called featherfoot by this guy. So that was like the only thought I have when I was up in this tree. I was not really worried about it breaking. And then it's very hazy after that. You get, as soon as EMTs arrive, they ask you questions like, can you feel this, can you feel that, can you move, and you can't, then basically direct them, cut here, remove my harness, because they couldn't really figure it out how they were going to do. I'm awake and conscious of this whole time. So, and moved into the ambulance, and at that time the police pops in and wants to do an interview about what's happened, while they are trying to remove me to the hospital, to the point where EMT services like, you have to wait with this, like you'll need to contact him at a later time because we need to go. And then it's like you come to the hospital, and it's very, I mean, you're pretty doped up at that moment. I was given morphine, I was given sedatives, I think I had fentanyl as well. So really make sure that you don't really feel anything. It was strange. It felt like I was being sucked into the ground with like half of my body. I was lying straight on my stretcher, and it felt like I was lying like this. I held on to a little bar that I found in the ambulance because I was afraid that I was gonna fall down, and that kept on for the entire day until I was sedated for operation. And from that time I spent a week at an orthopedic ward. This was just when COVID was starting to become a thing. We didn't have lockdown in Sweden, but hospitals were locked down. I was not allowed to have visitors. Not my girlfriend, not my parents, no one were allowed to come to the hospital. My girlfriend was allowed to come, but only for the main reason that she called the ward until they let her in. And my mother was there like one time. My father wasn't allowed in. He was gonna come, but that day they just decided that he will have no more visitors. And I was moved to a rehab facility that I was there for almost 100 days, and also there no visitors for 100 days, alone with only patients and hospital personnel. I was not allowed to go home, which is the normal way to do things during your rehabilitation, so you get to face like regular everyday problems. I was not, that never happened. And it is so strange to become basically a child again. Like you can't do anything, you can't get dressed, you can't go to the bathroom, you can't even sit up in bed because it's too painful, number one, and you don't know how to. Like, how do you even move your body with only using your arms? And bodily functions stopped working. Period, like for like a month or two, you're in spinal shock, which basically means that nothing works. Your entire spinal cord swells up, and internal functions, they shut down. Lots of bodily functions, they just shut down, and you can't really say how serious the damage is at that point, because you can't say. It's impossible to tell until that swelling has gone down. So in the very early days when the surgeon who did the operation on me, she came into my room and was talking to me. I simply just phoned my girlfriend, had it on speaker. I have no idea what this doctor said to me. I have absolutely no idea. I was too sedated on morphine. I still to this day don't know what she said, and I think it's a little bit strange in a situation like that you are being told about how your life is going to be and how the operation has gone, and you're not really, you're there but you're not really there. So yeah, about 100 days in the hospital and I'm released into my home, which doesn't work for me. I live on the second floor, no elevator. I can get out because I can go downstairs, but I couldn't get in again. So every time I needed to leave my apartment, I needed to make sure that I had at least 1 or 2 friends with me who could carry me up. So we sold our apartment and moved. And so the accident happened in mid-April, and I was back at work at the 1st of December, same year, so about 7.5 months later. And I think that feels like it's pretty fast to come back from a major accident. I was speaking with, this was like this rehab facility had people that had been injured for a long time ago who had some complications. We're speaking about how it used to be. We first were like in a plaster cradle for 9 months, and then you started your rehabilitation, and then after that you were released. Maybe you were in the hospital for 1.5 years maybe. But now they set your spine correct and they fixate that, and then they basically want you up almost the very next day. So you start your rehabilitation at that point. And there are so many, I mean, this is the obvious thing that people see. I can't walk anymore. That's what people see. I can also not feel anything, which has its own like complications. Bladder, bowel doesn't work. Sexual function doesn't really work. I'm practically sterile. There are loads of things that can like literally kill me if I'm not careful. Not being able to move will lead to osteoporosis of the bones, higher risk for blood clotting, and might get deep vein thrombosis, edema. Urinary tract infections is a huge problem for people with spinal cord injury, and that is also one of the main reasons that you die, because you get urosepsis and you get organ failure and you die. Since I can't feel, like you are sitting on all these chairs and you will start to move around after a while, that's your skin sending a signal to your brain cell telling you that I'm not getting enough oxygen, you need to move. And I'm not getting that, which means that if I sit still for too long a time, or if it's too hard, skin will die, and then fat and muscle tissue will die, and then bone will die. If that happens, it can take, if it heals again, if it actually heals, that can take years if we were talking about the really deep sores, and just the not so big wounds that is not really a wound, like you get a blister basically, that can take months or up to a year to heal, and you're at huge risk of infection, like systemic infection from that type, and it's basically the same as with organ failures and things. So it's yeah, that's a bit worrying. When they don't really tell you this like in the beginning. They give you parts of this all the time. Like when they think you're ready, you get a little bit more information about how your life is going to be, because it's too overwhelming at the beginning. But most people can, the life expectancy is roughly the same for people that are injured, that are not injured nowadays. Before antibiotic, it was 6 months after injury, and then you died of infection basically. So it's become a lot better, and AIDS has become better, and like societal health is everything is better now. So that's good. And when I spoke with my boss about what's going to happen, like what's going to happen with me now, That's because those are feelings that you get pretty much instantaneously. What's going to happen in my life now? Who am I? What will I do? Can I contribute? And for him, it was like never even an issue. So it's like, yeah, I have loads of stuff for you to do. I really need someone to help me with parts of the job he was doing. My job is part administration, part arboricultural. And for my arboricultural work that I do surveying, tree risk assessment, and in that it's been really, really important to me to get credibility, do a tree risk assessment course, ISA track. Since I can't get ETW anymore, I'm an ISA certified arborist now. And this helps me every time I need to speak with an authority or municipality or anyone where I am making suggestions and decisions, because it carries so much more weight than just saying you're an arborist, because that doesn't really mean anything since it's not a protected title.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
So just regarding about what Andreas was just saying at the end there, obviously he's still working in the industry. So just bearing in mind, if there is such an accident on a work site that is life-changing, it's not the end of the road. It might feel like it in the moment when the world is coming down on you and you feel in such a bad place. I can't imagine. But yeah, there's lots of options in our industry to take new paths and continue, I guess, the work that you're passionate about or that you enjoy. It's not, and Andreas is living proof of that you can still work in the industry that you love, just not in the same manner, unfortunately. So yeah, it's great that Andreas is still working with us. I just want to highlight the fact that he is a key part of our team with the organising in between management and to the crews, in getting some key bits of information across to us that might have been missed from my boss, and also just playing his part in the bigger picture, which is the company and working. And yeah, I just want to make a little side highlight how awesome our boss is, that he's kept Andreas on in such a scenario, and that he's created a new role for Andreas within the company where, like he said, he feels appreciated, and that the work he's doing, it's not like he's had the accident and they're just saying, oh yeah, you can go do this now, you can't do anything else. He's feeling valued, and he's playing a key part in our team, which is really important.
It is
mention.
important. You have to have meaningful work if you're going to feel that you feel that you actually contribute. I try to make a flow chart of how our company works. So basically, client contacts Andreas, which is our boss, about something. He gets back with a quote and then get yes or no. And if he gets a yes, I'm next in line to deal with that. Like, when is this going to happen? How many are we going to go there? Is there going to be pickups? It's going to be stump grinding. Do we need to get permission from authorities? Do we need to close roads? Anything else that needs to be taken care of? All client contact after that initial moment, yes or no, can we do this job? It's basically me doing, and when they're off working, Andreas is doing other things. He's looking at jobs, he's doing his type of work. So he's rarely, he's only available for short periods of time during the day. Like, you have to call him and then he calls you back. So I'm the one being contacted by the crews. We need more work to do. What's the situation here? What are we gonna do? I only work part-time. I work 50% now, and then I'm on sick leave for the rest of the time, which ends pretty soon, so I'm gonna have to deal with that again. But I think I'm pretty lucky in a way that I will probably be what's called sjukpensionär. I'll be retired for 50%, so I don't have to deal with the stress of applying for a new sick leave period, because I have very, very good people that are handling my case at Försäkringskassan. But if those people quit and I get a new person, they might pretty much they can say from one day to another, no, you can work 100%. That's no problem. Like you can get a desk job somewhere, but and I probably could for like 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, but the next week I would definitely not be able to do it. Like
Ups and downs.
no, the energy levels for a person that is injured like me is not the same as an uninjured person. I get tired, I get lots of pain, and pain that's not really real. It's hard to describe. It's, neuropathic pain, basically when the brain is not getting signals from a part of your body, the brain makes up stuff about that part of your body, and clearly the way it goes to is serious damage. It feels like it can feel like my legs are burning and being frozen at the same time while someone is raking in them with some sort of trough like you use in like in your garden or when you're in the soil. It can feel like imagine like after a very long winter you go on a holiday and you fall asleep in the sun without sunscreen for the first day and you become really sunburnt, and then someone comes in and just squeezes your skin. It can feel like there's stuff exploding, and allodynia on a place here, which means that the nerves in this area is hyperactive. Any sort of touch can at times be super painful, like putting on a sweater or a t-shirt can be very painful. And this is not stuff I can control. I have medication, but the medication is like so it helps, but it doesn't take it away. It's also, we don't really know, there is very little known about the central nervous system, so they don't actually know how it functions. The medication I have is for epilepsy, so it's just like they have tried this medication on some people, it works for someone, and for someone it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't work, you get a new one, and you get a new one, or you just say, I don't want anything and deal with the pain. But I can't do that. If I forget to take my medication, I notice, and it becomes the only thing I can think about when the level starts to rise over the course of a day. So I need to be able to only work part-time. But there was, from my boss's point of view, he was fine with like anything from like 25, 50, 75, 100%. He had a plan for everything. And I think that was really great. And I'm happy that he did that. And I'm also very happy that I'm lucky to have such good handlers at Försäkringskassan, because it makes like all the difference. Like one person gets so much power over your life, and you can't really do anything about it. That's a bit strange, actually.
Shall I say a few things?
Sure.
Yeah. So just going back to the whole day's events and the accident itself, but this is just more of a general sort of highlight point, just for everyone to take into account, not necessarily specific to what happened to Andreas, but just to highlight some safety factors of working at heights and trees. So obviously, if you do have, a high anchor point, and let's say you are in a pine and there's not multiple tops, there's just one, or let's say there's maybe like 4 tops or something as an example. It's generally a good idea, and obviously this is very much species dependent, but just to highlight the importance of safety working in our industry, and also just painting an image. If you do have, let's say, a pine tree with like 4 tops, you have your main anchor point, let's say maybe a meter below where, or kind of at your waist level or whatnot. Maybe if you are working above your anchor point, it's probably a good idea, not saying that none of you don't do this, but I just want to highlight it as safety. Maybe instead of just stropping into, let's say as an example, like the same top that you're roped into with your primary system, maybe you could use multiple tops, just to, you know, if something did happen, you have a backup plan. You know, if one top snaps up, I've still got 2 tops to depend on. And very much with species like willow or pill, you know, where the wood is quite soft anyway. Let's say you have a big pollard, and that's the job. You know, just think about the species and take a step back from your job. Don't cut corners. I'm not saying that we did, but just as a bigger thing, you know, we all have a boss, and they're like, oh, you need to get this job done, you know, blah blah blah. You know, we need to get it done. Just take a step back and think about what you're doing, and think before you do. Because there's been times when I've been doing jobs, and you know, let's say I do something a little bit sketchy, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But if you just take a step back and think about the whole situation and assess it, you know, just takes 10 seconds in your brain when you're in that scenario. And then, you know, just think, okay, if I do this, this is probably going to happen. If I do this, it might come back on me or whatever. You know, just really, I really want to highlight that, you know, it doesn't matter what everyone else is saying on the job site. Let's say you have someone on the ground and they need to get home because they've got a fancy dinner to get to, and they're like, come on mate, get a move on. I need to get home. Forget about that. You're the one up in the tree making the decisions. It's your life at stake, potentially. Just take a step back and say, shut up mate, let me do my job. You know, and safety is priority for everyone. And that's, yeah, just something that I really want to highlight, you know, in any situation, that you really need to take the safety aspects of this job very seriously, because as we can see, life-changing events can happen. If not saying that, you know, this was a freak accident, but if you do skip safety measures, not saying it was skipped, but it can have consequences that are unreversible, basically. And we want to try and minimize that or avoid it as much as we can within our, you know, within our reach. Yeah. So also, now that we've gone over the whole accident and sort of painted the picture for you, and we've gone over some sort of safety factors as well, and how important that is. You know, if you see your colleague not strapped in, or one handing a chainsaw, you know, it doesn't need to, you know, be a malicious kind of attack on someone. I'm not saying it is, but it's just natural to take that criticism as a negative manner. But it's more like, I want you to work safe so nothing bad happens. So if you do see that, maybe just say like, look buddy, like maybe it's better if you're strapped in, or you know, you're following the guidelines of the safety in our industry, because it's going to minimize, you know, serious accidents happening on site, definitely. So now that you all know the story, so we can talk about how we have both dealt with the accident moving forward. Yes, obviously Andreas has gone into some detail about how he's had to deal with the accident from his perspective, with what happened next and stuff. I think he's going to go into a bit more detail as well. But from my perspective, yeah, you know, it was very hard for me to deal with. For one, being the person in charge and feeling a sense of responsibility for Andreas and what happened, especially when it first happened, because yeah, that was just my sort of natural instinct kicking in, being like, you know, what could I have done differently to avoid that? But it was out of my control, and it took a while. I'd say maybe a year after the accident happened to fully accept that, and like from people around me, colleagues, friends, family, you know, saying like, look Fian, there's nothing you could have done differently to change the events that happened that day. You need to, you know, just try and move forward and in a positive manner with everything that happened. And that's kind of where I am now. But yeah, it was quite hard to accept that, because I only want the best for the team and everyone on the work site. You know, yeah, safety being the priority, and obviously a high standard of work. But that's not as important. And then, so yeah, through the company that we both work for, my boss, he got me a few sessions of therapy. I'm not a massive fan of therapy, personally. That's just my opinion. Anyway, regarding everything that happened, I thought, you know, it's good to talk to someone about this, just for my own benefit, you know, mental state and everything. So yeah, there was 2 therapy sessions. They were supposed to be 3, but I kind of cancelled the last one. But it was something for me that's important, is like face-to-face kind of, you know, on a face-to-face basis, if I'm talking about something that's so personal to me. Whereas this was, I think the psychologist was based in Stockholm, so it was like an over-the-phone kind of meeting where I couldn't really, in my eyes, open up as much. But that's just from my perspective. So the first session was good-ish, where she's like, okay, so what happened, and you know, how has it affected you? And we kind of went into some detail about that. And then that's where it kind of ended for me. I didn't really have much more to say to her at that time and point. Yeah, so, but it was good that my boss gave that to me as an option. Like Andreas was saying, sometimes the people who are involved in the accident scenario but aren't the casualty per se, they get overlooked, because obviously the one who's had the accident is the priority, of course. But yeah, I think Andreas is right that, you know, both parties need to be addressed, and you know, it needs to be handled with care, for sure. So I really appreciate that I got that, you know, support network from my boss if I needed it, which at the time I kind of did. And yeah, I can say for sure, at least after, like, let's say 1 year, so the year from the point that the accident happens to 1 year after the accident happened, that year was me, when I was working after everything that had happened, I was very cautious, extra cautious. You know, I like to think I'm a confident climber because I've been working for a long time, so I know what I'm doing. But even though that is the case, I had to take a step back and look at what happened and think, how can I avoid this happening to myself? Not that it will, but you know, there's always a risk, of course. So I was taking extra caution and like almost getting paranoia about my anchor point selection because of what had happened. You know, getting flashbacks and all of this, and
How soon did you get back to work afterwards?
me,
Yeah.
I was back to work the next day. But this was with me throughout the whole time, of course, and it was in the back of my mind, we can say, that yeah, you know, this had happened and it was a life-changing event for Andreas and for myself as well, being involved in that situation. So yeah, for the first year I was very
Sorry.
yeah.
Do you think you should have had time off immediately after? Do you think it was good that you went back in?
I guess there's 2 perspectives. Like obviously maybe I could have had some time off just to, you know, take a step back and, you know, take some self-time, we can call it. But also from my perspective, I prefer to be at work, and just that taking the priority in my thought process away from me just being at home and going over the accident in my head, because that's what I would do, and then feeling, yeah, maybe feeling worse in the bigger picture if I were in that situation. So for me, obviously everyone's different. Maybe some people might need some time to sort of overcome that or to process it. But for me, I needed to get back at work and continue as normal, to try and normalise the whole chain of events to a degree, of course.
Left out, but yeah, the personnel there was they're real good. So it's basically like being with friends who take care of you really well and make fun of you when at times
Did
they
it
are
take
not.
a long time for you to accept the thing that happened to you? Or
No, fairly quick.
Yeah.
Like it took a long time in a sense that to like become okay with it. I don't think I really am yet in a way, but like accepting that it had happened and you have choice there. Like, should I go on or should I not go on? And that was not really a choice for me. Like, I chose to move on directly, get into my rehab, and try to speak with the psychologist and dealing with all of that. So, but, yeah, that can be tough. And they told me, yeah, it'll probably take like 3 years before you're somewhat okay with this, because that's a normal psychological time to deal with trauma is roughly 2-3 years for most people. And that was also, when you hear that, it's like, oh, come on, like 2-3 years I'm gonna deal with this shit in my head for that long. So, yeah.
Have you guys done this before, talking to people?
No, this is the first
This
time.
is the first time.
Is it the last?
Who knows?
I don't.
You shouldn't leave it at this. You should continue, because this is really important stuff to hear about.
It's really, I think it's
Yeah, it's very
amazing that you're
brave.
doing it, and I think it's really valuable, and it doesn't
Definitely.
have to just be with arborists, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
No, definitely not.
No,
you're right.
Stuff can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
People fall off horses and break their backs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. People get in all types of weird accidents and have spinal cord injury, for instance. It's and you don't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be traumatic injuries. Like, you can get a random bleeding in your spinal cord and get paralyzed for no reason whatsoever. That is so absurd to me. That it's so unfair. Like, I know what's happened to me, but like waking up one day and just dropping parts of your body throughout the day, I don't even know how you deal with that.
How is the
Yeah.
science with the spinal cord
Yeah.
stuff, though?
It's not
Crazy.
science going forward. Like, it's mainly focused on walking,
Okay,
which is like on the last of the list of what people with spinal cord injury want.
okay. Interesting,
But
yeah.
people who walk think it's really important to walk, and they are doing all the research, because if you can walk, you're healthy.
Yeah.
So, like, for people with paraplegia, it's usually like sexual function is number one on the list what people want back. Number two is like bowel and bladder control, and then is pain management, like getting rid of this constant pain that is 24/7 on different levels. And then
Just like life quality.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and then lastly it's like walking. We can get around. That's already dealt with.
Yeah, I saw you arriving. I was like, oh, okay. Should I go and help this person? Nope, they seem to be fine. Okay.
Yeah, so it's mainly like various forms of like electronic stimulators that is implanted into your spine, and I think like recently it's like biomimicking. So your body is kind of walking by itself from how you lean, and it like reads, and then it sends impulses, and the legs move. But there's also a problem with that, like, because if you have no sensory feedback, you could, like, your foot could be like completely wrong, and it's so easy to like break your bones when you are walking and
then you
not
have
feeling
infection
anything,
issues
so it
and-
could be
yeah.
problematic. There's some stem cell research going on, I think. The only way to move past this, I have scar tissue in my spinal cord. That's that tissue, those cells, they don't really heal or regenerate, they form scar tissue, and that's it. So it's a blockage of signals, basically. The only way around it is like either find a way to break that up or find a way to bridge it. Those are the only ways past it, basically. And yeah, we'll see. They have said for the last 30 years, people say that it's only 5 years away and we'll be able to fix this. So we'll see in 5 years and 10 years. And you come to a point where you come a shifting point in like technological revolution that it's really takes care of itself in a way. Like one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. We're pretty far ahead at the moment with computer science at the moment. So who knows? Maybe in my lifetime it will be dealt with. But I mean, if I'm really old, I assume that I will not be like on the top of the list to be in for treatment. But they were really clear about that in the rehab facility. Like the person who was like the head doctor, he clearly said that there is absolutely no treatment for this. You should not go anywhere in the world and pay huge deals of money to do speculative like treatments, because it's not going to work, and you will become sadder and poorer.
And maybe more injured.
Maybe
Yeah,
more
exactly.
injured as well.
Make
Yes.
it worse.
Yep. There
More
are stories about
problematic,
that. People, their
potentially.
like pain levels have gone up a lot afterwards. I mean, but there are differences, of course. Like no injury is the same. I'm a complete spinal cord injury, which means that it's complete, like no sensory function, no motor function. You can be incomplete. You can maybe move a little, or maybe you can feel something, and it's all very different. Some people can walk and some people can't walk, and so can only walk a little. Like you can walk maybe 100 meters and then you're done for the entire day. Like you can't do anything else. So it's I mean, it opens up a whole new world in a sense of knowledge. Like I had no idea of any of this before I got injured. It was like, oh well, you get paralyzed and you can't walk. That's pretty much what you know. That's what you see in movies, and then some doctor comes in and says you're never gonna walk again.
So yeah, it must have been like kind of a traumatic experience for like your family and your girlfriend as well, because it's like everyone's life changed overnight.
Of course, yeah. I mean, in the beginning it was we talked a lot. I had a lot of video calls, and it kind of, with my parents, like it went when I come home. It's gone back to the same. Like I am not very good at contacting my parents. We don't have a bad relationship or anything. It's just that I don't really feel the need to. So, but in the beginning, it was very a lot of contact between us, and they want to know. They're my parents. They want to know what's happening and how is it going, and it's really strange. I mean, we were not allowed to be visited. They said that we're not in charge of what you do outside, which is basically saying like you can meet them outside, but we don't like it, and if you do that, you can't touch, and you need to be like a couple of meters away from each other. So yeah.
So what, they came outside and were like, hello.
Yeah, pretty much like well, sit at a distance like this and speaking.
Paper cup and string.
But yeah, not I mean, like not getting a hug when by your parents or your girlfriend or your spouse or partner or whatever when this happened. It's hard. I mean, it's really.
Do you think that can affect the recovery period? I mean, because mental support and like support from your loved ones is quite important in these situations.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, it could definitely maybe prolong it. I mean, I was scared as hell. I didn't really want to go home, which means that first signs of being seriously institutionalized, like preferring to stay in the hospital than going back into the real world, because I knew that area. I mean, the life there was very easy.
And safe.
Very safe,
Exactly.
and very like everything was on specific times, like wake up, breakfast, training, rest, lunch, training, rest, dinner, bedtime. Oh, but I mean, you can't really live like that.
But how was the transition from that to going home? I mean, physically it's understandable, but mentally?
It was okay, I think. I mean, the only problem was like the apartment we lived in, it was built in the 60s. Second floor, no elevator. Well, yeah, that's one thing. I couldn't get into the bathroom because they're like the door hold, the door
Oh.
It was too small
Mm.
for this wheelchair,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't go to the bathroom in the bathroom, and I couldn't go into the bathroom on my own. I had like a little bathroom chair, but it didn't have push rims because then it would have been too wide.
big.
So needed to get help. So that's annoying. I mean, the sense of independence
Yeah.
is really important. Like I drive my car to work every day. That's no problem. I drive with a little hand throttle, which means I can also go on every site that I need to go to by myself. I don't need anyone with me who helps me. I can load up my wheelchair no problem and bring the stuff I need. So that, I mean, in the beginning I had to get driven to work, like with a sick taxi or whatever you call it, and they don't really always show up on time, and they're too late, and you're going home. You just want to go home because you're tired and in pain, and they need to drop someone else off or pick someone else up. It's really annoying. But, so that getting my own car was nice. But yeah, environmentally it's really bad to become injured like this. Like my plastic usage has gone up enormously. Like it's absurd.
I wouldn't worry about that.
I'm also like,
No, but I mean, like it's like with the carbon footprint, it just like it grows massively. Because I mean,
lovely. So it's like you're injured and you get the guilt trip of you're like, great, now I'm also.
What would Greta say?
yeah, but because I mean, like I use my single-use catheters that are plastic and wrapped in plastic 6 times a day, and some other catheters for like when I need to poo, and there is everything is plastic, but it needs to be. I mean, there's no other. Yeah, that's also one thing that kind of worries me. Like future-wise, what happens if everything just gets really bad societally? Like, how will I get stuff I need to survive? Like being in a situation like a war in Ukraine, for instance. Like they don't.
Car without the wood.
Yeah, maybe.
But you said that your girlfriend has become a little bit like your caretaker as
Yeah.
well. Are you eligible for like having a caretaker?
No,
You're not?
I'm not. I'm too well functioning. Like I'm not injured enough to have that.
Bureaucracy.
And I mean, I don't really need much help. I need a little bit of help when I'm showering because our bathroom is not that. It's good because it's new, but it's not perfect. Some of the, like I want her to like hold my wheelchair when I transfer, so it doesn't like flip over and move.